What is going on, everyone? Welcome back to this week's installment on The Lake Show, and I really appreciate you all making me a part of your day. So last week I discussed the massive Myles Garrett trade. Myles Garrett, no longer a Cleveland Brown, now an LA Ram, and I feel horrible for Jared Verse. Standout defensive end. He went to sleep a Ram and then woke up a Cleveland Brown. That I can't think of one of the more terrible things to happen to you if you're a pro athlete in all of professional sports. You go from a perennial Super Bowl contender one day, and then the next day you're a Cleveland Brown, one of the worst teams in the NFL. You know, I thought about that. The worst part in that whole thing is just the fact, like, you're moving from sunny, warm weather all year round Los Angeles to crappy, cold, rainy, just terrible weather Cleveland. I think that's the worst part in it all when it comes to Jared Verse becoming a Cleveland Brown. So I discussed that massive trade. I also discussed the issues with a 24-team playoff. So obviously, full episode releasing tonight. It is June 10th. I'm sorry for the late, recording, but it's still going to be a fun episode. We got a lot of college football to talk about as we get through the summer months and still less than 100 days. I think it's less than 90 days now until the 2026 college football season kicks off. So tonight, I'm pretty sure this episode will release around, I want to say midday of today, June 10th. So, again, sorry, I wanted to post yesterday, but I ran out of time to come over and record today. So, but tonight on ABC, we got at 8:30, we have Game 4 of the NBA Finals. Right now, the New York Knicks have a 2-1 series lead after Victor Wembanyama and the Spurs captured Game 3. Not by much, but right now, the spread is minus 2.5 for New York. And moneyline San Antonio plus 114. I still think the Knicks in 6. I don't know if the Spurs have enough to keep up with them. I do think that the Knicks will rebound and take a 3-1 series lead tonight. We will see how that goes, but that is what we got going on in the NBA. So, like I said, college football is the big topic today, and I don't think there's anything bigger than to start with the Brendan Sorsby, quarterback for Texas Tech situation. So as we all know, I think it was about a month ago when the issue was brought about, the NCAA, that Brendan Sorsby has been gambling, has had issues with gambling in the past, especially when he was on Indiana a couple years ago, placing bets on not only his team to win, but against his team, I'm pretty sure. But regardless, if there's one thing that has been known in the entirety of professional and collegiate sport, is that when you are on a team, you cannot and will not bet on your own team to win or to lose. That is like the cardinal sin in college athletics and basically professional sports in general. And I cannot believe that I forgot to do this. I thank you all for tuning in, but I give all glory and all praise to my one true God, to the one true God, my Lord Jesus Christ, one who allows me to do this every single day. Can't believe I forgot to do that at the beginning of my episode. I'm very ashamed of that, but, it happens sometimes. But all praise and all glory to the one true King, Jesus Christ. I thank him every single day for the life that I live and for being allowed to do, all these fun things in my life. He's the reason I'm here, and I am forever grateful and will always choose to follow him above anything else in this world. So, got that down. So, I apologize for not doing that. To start off. But, all right, back to what we were talking about. Brendan Sorsby basically told by the NCAA that he is suspended indefinitely, cannot participate in Texas Tech's football season this upcoming year, which essentially would have essentially ended his college football career right then and there. So recently, Texas Tech got a Lubbock, Texas judge who I believe graduated from Texas Tech to grant an injunction against the NCAA's ruling to suspend and, keep Brendan Sorsby from playing because, again, one of the biggest, the biggest not to do's in college football and college athletics in general is place bets on your own team. This has been, one of the biggest stories ever is the fact that Pete Rose is still not in the MLB Hall of Fame, and he will forever be kept out of the Hall of Fame because of his gambling habits and sports betting all those years ago. So that is a very sensitive subject of just in general. So Brendan Sorsby, originally not supposed to play this year. Well, now because he was granted an injunction, will be allowed to participate in the 2026 college football season on Texas Tech. So Texas Tech suspends Brendan Sorsby for the first 2 games this upcoming year, which, they're against Abilene Christian and at Oregon State. So realistically, they don't need Brendan Sorsby. They can definitely stick with Will Hammond, who I don't think is a bad quarterback whatsoever. But we're going to discuss more about, teams in general in a little bit. But first, Brendan Sorsby. This is basically what Texas Tech has done, and what this judge in Texas has done is basically pull the pin and throw the grenade and just see what happens. This is a bombshell for college athletics. This is a bombshell for college football and everything that, the integrity of the entire sport. Now, this is my personal opinion. I do not care if Brendan Sorsby placed bets on his own team. I don't care if he was a starter at Indiana and placing bets like against Indiana or for Indiana. I'd have a problem if he was a starter. If you are a starter and have a very impactful role on your team and you actually get playing time, you should not be allowed to bet on your team. That's neither here nor there. My personal opinion on the matter doesn't really hold much weight. I don't personally have a problem that Brendan Sorsby himself was placing bets on Indiana football games, especially when he himself could not control the outcome whatsoever. It'd be different if he was a starting quarterback for Indiana at the time and directly influencing games and spreads. That is something I would have a problem with. But just because he was placing bets on his team to win when he had no chance to influence the outcome of that game, I don't think that that's much of an issue. Now, as far as him having a gambling problem, the fact that he's made thousands of prop bets over the past couple years, yes, that is definitely concerning in general. I think they did the right thing about going to rehab because gambling is an addiction. When I was when I really, really, really went all in on sports betting, it could become a problem. If you're not smart, it could become a problem. That's why there are warning labels on all of these gambling sites, on FanDuel, DraftKings, BetMGM, all of them. They all have warnings that it could be addictive and that they have numbers for that specific reason to basically keep you from getting addicted. But again, that's neither here nor there. That happens. But as far as my personal opinion on it, I do not care that Brendan Sorsby got an injunction granted. I personally don't care that he placed all those prop bets years ago because he had no influence in the outcome of those said games. So that's the first problem. So I want my opinion on the matter to be, just about him betting in general. Now, when it comes to the integrity of college football and the integrity of the sport, I do not think Brendan Sorsby should be allowed to play, even though I think it'll be good for college football to have a caliber player like Brendan Sorsby to play. But again, this is of his own doing. Texas Tech is kind of caught in the middle of it because this didn't happen under Texas Tech's watch. This happened at Indiana, and then Brendan Sorsby transferred to Cincinnati, and I'm sure that some of that, crept up over there, and now he's a Texas Tech quarterback. The biggest problem with this is that it compromises the entire integrity of college athletics. And right now, there are conferences, athletic directors, coaches that are actively boycotting playing Texas Tech in any other sport. It could be basketball, it could be baseball, it doesn't matter. All college football right now, I've never seen anybody so galvanized against one cause, quite like the backlash that Texas Tech, not even necessarily Texas Tech as an institution, but the Lubbock, Texas judge that went to Texas Tech granting said injunction in general, allowing Brendan Sorsby to play. Again, it is perfectly within their right that these teams, are frustrated and angry and outraged by this, because if there's been one thing that's been held true for years, even though there's been so many different scandals and, up and down things that have happened in college athletics and college football in general over the years, there has been one definite constant, and is that you do not place bets on the same sport that you are playing in. If all he did was place bets in baseball, college basketball, NFL, NBA, MLB, NHL, it don't matter. None of this would be happening. So unfortunately, this is what it's come to. Now, throw another wrench into the mix. If all these schools decide to, you know what, we're not going to play Texas Tech. Well, here's the thing. That's called a forfeit. And you, in, retrospect, tank your own season. I'm speaking in college football terms right now. So if you're in the Big 12, what do? You just stand by idle and watch this happen, or do you forfeit the game? A forfeit counts as a loss for your program. So if you are a team, like let's say you are a BYU or a Utah or a Houston, you have college football playoff aspirations year in and year out. Obviously, the Big 12 don't get as many in as the Big 10 and the SEC. They're like the ACC in that sense, where it's a 1 or 2 team bid league to get into the college football playoff. But when you look at all of this, what are you going to do? If you are Utah, if you are Kansas State, if you are Houston, BYU, you guys have college football playoff aspirations. And we all know how much a loss hurts your team in pursuit of making the college football playoff. We know this. So you're stuck between a rock and a hard place. If you're an opposing team in general, what do? You want to stand up for the integrity of college football and basically say what Texas Tech is doing is wrong, or what the judge rather did was wrong, or, you basically forfeit away your season, or you just suck it up and deal with it at that point. Unfortunately, I do think Texas Tech is going to be placed into a position where, it might be better to have Brendan Sorsby sit, but I do not think that's going to happen. Texas Tech is coming fresh off of a college football playoff berth, a Big 12 championship. There is no way that they are going to bench Brendan Sorsby. Obviously, for those first 2 games that he's suspended against Abilene Christian and Oregon State, yes, he'll be sitting those because of suspension. If you're Texas Tech, there's no reason that you should have him sit. Why would you? At that, you're buying it. You went all in on Brendan Sorsby to bring you a possible college football playoff national championship. Do I think Texas Tech is going to win the national title even with Brendan Sorsby? No. Do I think they can make a deeper run into the playoff than they did last year, getting bounced in the first round by Oregon? Absolutely. I think Brendan Sorsby is a much better and much more talented quarterback than what they had last year in Baron Morton. So this is the current scandal going on in college football. I think it's a massive one. I think it's going to have irreparable consequences. Back in the old days of college football, this would just be the consequences of his actions, unfortunately. But we live in a world now where NIL, paying players, now it's gotten into the point where, you go into the legal system and the NCAA is toothless at that point. To circle it all back to the NCAA's ruling, it's basically a big middle finger to the NCAA, basically saying, no, you don't really have any power whatsoever. The second paying players was allowed in college athletics, the NCAA lost all power that they thought they had in general. And I'm not a fan of the NCAA whatsoever. It's just a 4-letter institution that really has no true power and can't enforce any sort of rules and regulations or accountability for any programs now because of paying players and stuff like that. the NCAA is toothless. They can't enforce anything, apparently. So I do think that's a big indictment on the NCAA. Now, I know they filed an appeal to basically uphold their ruling, but how likely is that to happen? I don't think it's likely to happen at all. So that's currently going on right now. This happened, I believe it was yesterday or 2 days ago. But either way, massive, massive news for college football. And I really think that this alone is going to cause some irreparable damage. So unfortunately, that's the state of college football right now. You know, it's starting to spiral out of control, and that's just the world we live in. All right, so now I'm going to jump into talking about college football teams in general. Excuse me. It's so warm in here, and it's so hot today that I'm just breaking out sweating. I mean, it's just ridiculous. So I apologize about that. But now, for the duration of this show, I'm going to talk about specific teams in general from all Power 4 conferences. You know, I'm talking about all the big-time programs, Ohio State, Indiana, Texas, you know, Bama, Georgia, Miami, Notre Dame, all of those teams. I'm going to go into conference by conference. I'm going to go with the top teams that have, like, the biggest national championship odds, the biggest odds to make the playoff, the more notable teams from these conferences. I'm going to talk about their possible ceiling and their possible floor and what their keys should be going into the season to propel themselves to the college football playoff, to win a college football playoff game, or national championship aspirations. So I'm going to start with the Ohio State Buckeyes. I really think that the sky's the limit for Ohio State. It's year in and year out at this point. You know, they're just a juggernaut. They're one of the best programs in college football. So I think their ceiling this year is undefeated. A complete 16-0 national championship berth. I think Ohio State, their ceiling, as far as everything is concerned, I think is 16-0. I think that's their ceiling. Their floor, I can see it being a 9-3 kind of season. There's three games I'm paying attention to when I say something like that. Ohio State, their ceiling, national championship. Their floor, I'm pretty sure it would be at 9-3. There's a couple teams on their schedule that I'm taking a look at. Of course, you have at Texas in week 2, which is no gimme whatsoever, especially since Texas, I think, is going to be better than last year, 100%. I think Texas is a playoff team, as well as Ohio State. I think they're a playoff team, but it's possible. If I'm looking at their floor at 9-3, I see Texas on their schedule. I see at Iowa, which I think at Iowa, I do think Ohio State has a good chance to lose. Iowa has always been a tough out for the Buckeyes, especially when they get to that. I don't know what it is about playing in Iowa, but Ohio State always has some struggles playing Iowa. They don't always lose to them. I think the last time Ohio State lost to Iowa in Iowa was 2018, I believe, but it was a thrashing, like 55-28, something like that. The late great Dwayne Haskins, rest in peace, threw like 3 or 4 interceptions that day. So Ohio State, Texas is losable, at Iowa is losable, and then you get into the nitty gritty. You got Indiana, USC, Oregon, at Nebraska, Michigan. Like, there are games on here that Ohio State can definitely lose. These are losable games. The most losable games, if you're looking at Ohio State going 9-3 this year as their floor, at least I think that's their floor, they lose to Texas on the road, they lose to Iowa on the road, and then they would lose one of Indiana, USC, or Oregon. The fact that Ohio State has to travel to the Coliseum this year, I think it's going to be phenomenal. It's going to be a spectacle to watch. So I think Ohio State's ceiling this year, national champion, 16-0. Their floor this year, I would say 9-3. Some of the keys to this, I think, you got to get better on the offensive line. 100% has to happen. You have to get better on the offensive line. They could not run the ball as accustomed as we are to Ohio State running the football. Better run game has to be key. Julian Sand has to continue to progress. And I think getting the early freshmen involved, like Chris Henry, the upcoming wide receiver, there's already reports out there that he can have like a Jeremiah Smith-esque kind of freshman season, and I see it. He's super, super talented. But right now, When it comes to Ohio State, I'd say they're ceiling national champions at 16-0, and then the floor, I would say, would be 9-3. Let's move on to the Oregon Ducks. So I would say Oregon, same boat. I think Oregon has a ceiling of, I would say, national champion, maybe 15-1, 16-0 sort of situation. And then you got, I think their floor would be, again, like Ohio State, 9-3. I'd lean more so towards 10-2. The two toughest games on Oregon's schedule, definitely, in my opinion, at USC and at Ohio State. I think they could easily lose both of those. And I don't know if 2 losses would get them into the playoff, but this is probably the most talented team that Dan Lanning has had at his time in Oregon. Basically brings back, I think it's upwards of 80% of his production. I don't think this is college football fans saying that Dan Lanning hasn't won nothing. You know, they're talking through the scope of, you have to win a national championship or if you've won nothing. There are 2 active head coaches, as far as I know, that have won national championships. That is Curt Cignetti and Dabo Swinney. I can't think of another one that has actively won a national championship. And one of them's down. We all know that Clemson is down right now, but they could bounce back in a big way. But that's the standard, apparently, for, you haven't won anything in college football. It's the same argument with Mario Cristobal and guys like Kirby Smart, Curt Cignetti, and Dabo Swinney. Those are the only ones who have won a national championship that are active head coaches. And there's 168, I'm pretty sure, D1 programs. So I think the standard that we measure coaches' success on is kind of messed up. Like Mario Cristobal doesn't have any ACC championships, and he doesn't have any national championships at Miami right now. But he has taken that program to a new height that it hasn't seen in 20 years. So I think the way we measure coaches is outrageous. But as far as Oregon, keep that talent together and just, work on the trenches continuously. They should have one of the best pass rushes in college football, as well as one of the best pass games in college football. Dante Moore is back. I think Oregon, I believe they'll be preseason number 1 up there with Notre Dame. But as far as Oregon, I think their ceiling is a national championship. Their floor, I would say 10-2 with losses to USC and Ohio State. Now, let's move to USC. Let's talk about them a little bit. In I would say a do or die kind of year for Lincoln Riley. If we're talking about coaches that haven't achieved much when it comes to at their current program, Lincoln Riley's one of the top spots. He's one of the top coaches that come to mind. I think it's a put up or shut up kind of year for the Trojans and Lincoln Riley. So when I look at USC's schedule, their ceiling for me is a college football playoff berth. I think they can also win a playoff game. Jada Maava, a quarterback, gives you that chance, and Lincoln Riley as a play caller gives you that chance. I would say their ceiling is a college football playoff berth, maybe like 11-1, 10-2, making it into the college football playoff. But I think that their floor would be like 8-4, with losses to Oregon, Washington, Ohio State, and Indiana. You can even throw UCLA into the mix for a possible upset at the last game of the season. Coach Neuheisel down there, I'm pretty sure he's got something rolling. I'm pretty sure it was Rick Neuheisel's son that took over for Deshaun Foster. But either way, ceiling for USC, I don't think they're a national title contender. I do think that they're a playoff contender. I think that this is their best shot that they've had, other than with Caleb Williams in year 1. That was back when the 4-team playoff was still a thing. But I would say ceiling, college football playoff, and college football playoff win. And their floor, I'm looking at 7-5, 8-4 kind of season for USC. And at that point, I think Lincoln Riley would be on his way out of the door. So let's talk about the reigning national champions. Let's talk about Indiana Hoosiers. I'm going to go with, again, ceiling, I'd say national championship again. Curt Cignetti has proven that. This has been the biggest turnaround in college football history. Curt Cignetti is one of one when it comes to coaches at this current state right now. But what could Indiana's floor be? I'm looking at 8-4, possibly 9-3. And I think it's leaning more so towards the floor this year. Just because of their quarterback this year, they lost a lot of talent to the NFL. That's no surprise. That's no shock. But the way Josh Hoover plays this year, if he can minimize those mistakes and those turnovers, I think Indiana will be in great shape. But I don't necessarily trust Josh Hoover with that. So ceiling, I would say back-to-back national champions. Floor, I would say 9-3 with 8-4. More so 9-3. Losses would be, in my opinion, to Ohio State, Michigan, and USC. I'm not too high on Washington, as a lot of people might be, but that would be my floor and ceiling for the reigning national champion Indiana Hoosiers. Let's go to Iowa. They finished 9-4 last year. I think a 10-2, Iowa team, I think 10-2, 11-1 is their ceiling, and a college football playoff berth. I think that's their ceiling. Their floor, I can see 10-2 to like 9-3, even 8-4. They did finish 9-4 last year, but Iowa is like just one of those teams that they could go undefeated or they can go 8-4. They could win games they shouldn't, and they could lose games they shouldn't either. So if you're talking their ceiling, college football playoff berth, I don't know necessarily if they would win a playoff game, but I think they can make the playoff in the Big Ten. But if you're looking at their floor, looking at their schedule, I think that their floor would be a 10-2, 9-3 at worst, with losses to like Michigan, Ohio State, and Washington. I think they beat Washington, but again, I see Michigan and Ohio State being their two toughest outs, and I think that Iowa can definitely beat everybody on their schedule, including Ohio State, just because they host them, and Ohio State struggles on the road in Iowa. So I think the Hawkeyes, I think they can be on the up and up. All right, so those are the Big Ten teams. Let's transition into the ACC. So first one comes to mind, Miami Hurricanes. Ceiling, national champions, undefeated. I think that their talent level is, on par with teams like Ohio State, Notre Dame, Georgia, Indiana, Oregon. That talent pool that Miami has is unbelievable. The coaching has gotten so much better. Corey Heatherman in year 2, obviously they lost the 2 first-round behemoths of Ruben Bain and Akeem Mesidor, but I think that their ceiling, sky high, is the limit. National champions. With Darian Mensah coming in, Malachi Toney, a deeper wide receiver room, they might even have a better defense than last year, even though last year was a phenomenal defense. So Miami's ceiling, I would say undefeated, national championship aspirations right there. Their floor, I would say 10-2 again. The teams I can see given the most trouble would be at Clemson. Now, we'll see what kind of team Clemson is. We'll have a good notification of that, a good indication of what Clemson will be after week 1 when they play at LSU. I believe it's at LSU. But Clemson has always been a tough out for Miami. I know Miami won the last time they played, but still, in Death Valley, that's a tough place to play regardless of how they are. And then towards the end of the year in week 10 at Notre Dame, Notre Dame's looked at as the perennial number 1, team in America, and I wouldn't disagree with that. I think Notre Dame is a playoff team, and I think they're a national title contender, but we'll talk about Notre Dame here in a few. So Miami, bringing back so much production on the offensive side. So the biggest keys for Miami, how's the offensive line going to be? I believe it was 4 of them got drafted. 4 of the 5 starters left for the NFL draft and got drafted. So pretty much your whole offensive line is being replaced. That's not ideal. But if there's one coach I trust to get the offensive line right, it's Mario Cristobal, because he knows that position better than anybody. And early reports from spring, Miami's offensive line is going to be pretty good. And then defensive line. Can Miami's defensive line not necessarily match or be close to what Ruben Bain and Akeem Mesidor did last year? They might be even a little deeper than what they were last year. Obviously, you can't just plug and play Ruben Bain and Akeem Mesidor. You can't just replace those guys. So where are you at with those? I think Damon Wilson coming in from Missouri. You got Armando Blunt. Ahmad Moten's back. You got Hayden Lowe coming off the edge. Marquise Lightfoot. You got Muhammad Toure in manning the middle at linebacker. A deep secondary. Miami has national championship aspirations, and I think that they will reach them this year. I think that they're one of the powerhouses in college football right now, and they will be one of the toughest teams to beat. Ceiling, national title for Miami. Floor, 10-2 with losses to Clemson or Notre Dame, I can see as a possibility. So speaking of, we're going to transition. Speaking of Notre Dame, let's talk about Notre Dame. So I think Notre Dame, ceiling, national title, undefeated. I think national championship, I don't think it's a national title or bust, but their ceiling, national championship, undefeated, 16-0. Their floor is 10-2. And this is a scary 10-2 for Notre Dame to be in. Their two toughest games on their schedule. Obviously hosting Miami in week 10, but in week 8, they are at Brigham Young. Brigham Young, who we will talk about shortly, is coming back. Bear Bachmeier in year 2. Kalani Sitake has something great building there in Brigham Young. If Notre Dame loses to Miami and to Notre Dame, if Notre Dame loses to Miami and to BYU, what is their big win? I know that if they finish top 12, they are guaranteed a playoff spot, which, again, crybaby Notre Dame. That's what they go and do. But if they lose to Miami and if they lose to BYU, what is their big win? Because this schedule is probably one of the worst in Notre Dame's history. It is so bad, and their next toughest game would be SMU, but SMU has lost a ton of talent in general to the portal or to the NFL draft. So I'm not as high on SMU this year as I was last year. Excuse me. So that would be my question for Notre Dame. Can you put it all together? Can you put everything together? CJ Carr's coming back. Pretty much everybody important is coming back other than Jeremiah Love. The best team in America, argued by most, is Notre Dame right now. National title aspirations, I think their ceiling is 16-0, but that floor at 10-2, if that's a 10-2 floor that happens for Notre Dame again, I would hold my breath if I'm Notre Dame again on possibly making the college football playoff yet again. All right, so we talked about the ACC. Notre Dame's basically in the ACC, so we'll ditch over the rest of that. Let's talk about the SEC real quick as we're boiling down in the end of this episode. Let's start with Ole Miss, the team that was, the best team in the SEC last year. They went 13-2 last year. I think that's relatively the same as a ceiling this year. I love Trinidad Chambliss. I love Kejuan Lacey. My biggest question is, can Pete Golding put it together? He was thrust into the spot without really wanting to be the head coach, but nearly led his team to a national title berth. I'm impressed with what Pete Golding did, but how much is that going to pan out this year? I think a 13-2 season might be their ceiling. I don't think they're national championship contenders, but I do think that an 8-4 season is their floor. I'm looking at teams like Texas, Georgia, Oklahoma, Vanderbilt, Florida. Those are teams that I can see giving Ole Miss some trouble. So, in my opinion, Ole Miss ceiling, I'd say 12-0 regular season. Absolute ceiling. No, absolute ceiling 10-2. I think they could reach a ceiling of 13-2, but that's counting playoff wins in general. I think they can make the playoff again, definitely. But a floor, I would say 8-4 kind of season. Let's talk about Georgia. So last year, they won 12-2. This year, I think undefeated national champions is definitely a possibility. I think that would be their ceiling. Their floor, though, I'm looking at 10-2 to 9-3. Oklahoma's definitely losable. They struggle with Alabama every single year in the regular season, even though they housed them in the SEC title game last year. Oklahoma, Alabama, Auburn is scrappy. I think they're going to be scrappy this year, but I would say Oklahoma, Alabama, and Ole Miss. Ole Miss beat them in the Sugar Bowl last year to go on to the semifinals. So Georgia, national championship ceiling, floor, I think, at 9-3. Let's talk about Texas A&M. Last year, they went 11-2. Only losses coming to Texas at the end of the year and Miami in the playoff. I see Texas A&M again. I think they could definitely, I think their ceiling in the regular season, 11-1, 12-0, that sort of range. But I think if they're going to lose, their floor would be like 9-3, 8-4. For me, the losses would accumulate to LSU, Bama, Oklahoma, and Texas. So I think Texas A&M, ceiling, national, not even national title. I think 13-1, make the playoff undefeated and lose again. I don't know if I would put them as national title contenders just based on who they lost. So undefeated regular season or floor, I would say 8-4. We're going to talk about two more SEC teams after Alabama. Ceiling, I think they make the SEC championship. There's absolute ceiling. I think they can win a playoff game. But let me tell you, this schedule, it's favorable for them, but there are definitely some hiccups possibly in Alabama's future. I can see a 9-3 floor for the Crimson Tide. Losses to Georgia, Texas A&M, LSU. Then you can even probably throw Tennessee into the mix. So Alabama, I think that their ceiling is make the college football playoff. I don't think they're a national title contender, though, especially after losing Ty Simpson. All right, Texas, undefeated is their ceiling. I think national title is in their possibility and in their realm of possibility. I think a 16-0 undefeated national championship season is their ceiling. Sky high is the limit. But I do think that their floor would be 9-3. I'm looking at games like Oklahoma, Ohio State, Ole Miss, even LSU and Texas A&M aren't gimmies. So absolute floor would probably be 7-5, 8-4. I don't see that happening. I think they're definitely closer to the top end of college football than the middle of the pack of the SEC. But if we were going based on floor, teams I can see them losing to: Ohio State, absolutely; Oklahoma, Ole Miss, LSU, Texas A&M. All those are losable, definitely. But do I think that's going to happen? No. All right, last SEC team last year, the 10-3 Oklahoma Sooners. They made the playoff last year. I think that's like their ceiling again. I think they make the playoff again this year. I think it's possible. But again, 9-3, 8-4, I would say would be their floor. I'm looking at Michigan, Georgia, Texas, Ole Miss, even Texas A&M. That's 5 possibly. So I think 7-5 is in a realm of possibility at their floor. 7-5 or ceiling college football playoff berth and possible college football playoff win. All right, so now I'm going to transfer to we're going to finish off with the Big 12. Texas Tech, everybody's favorite Big 12 school, everybody's favorite school right now. I am sorry that I am sweating profusely right now. It's so hot in here. But Texas Tech, I would say their ceiling, undefeated regular season, and I would say could win a playoff game or two with Brendan Sorsby playing. But their floor, as their ceiling, their floor, I could see them losing 2, maybe 3 games. I'd say 10-2 would be their floor. Losing to Houston. They don't play BYU, but they do play at Baylor, and I would be concerned about that. DJ Lagway at Baylor may have a turnaround kind of season compared to what he had at Florida after transferring. So Texas Tech, I don't think they're national title contenders. I do think they're playoff contenders, and I do think that they can make a run in the playoff. I think they'll be a tough out for most people. They have a great defense, and again, I think the offense with Brendan Sorsby now, either or him or Will Hammond, whoever's at quarterback, I think is better than Bear Morton was last year. So I'd say 12-0 regular season, 13-0 Big 12 title game. I think they can win a playoff or two as their ceiling. Their floor, I'm looking at 10-2, 11-1. And now let's finish off with Brigham Young, finishing second in the Big 12 behind Texas Tech last year. There are only 2 losses from last year coming to Texas Tech in the regular season and in the Big 12 title game. BYU, yet again, I think that their floor, honestly, is a high floor but a low ceiling. I think their floor would be 11-1, possibly 10-2, with losses to Notre Dame and possibly Utah. Other than that, I think BYU has a great team, and I think they'll be back in the Big 12 title game. I think they'll be playing Texas Tech again in a rematch. But I think that their ceiling would be possibly winning a playoff game, sort of like Texas Tech. I don't have them as national title contenders, but I don't have them as middle of the pack or any crap like that. But in my opinion, I would say BYU has a floor. I think they have a high floor, but a low ceiling. I don't think they're national title contenders. I do think that they will possibly make a college football playoff this year. But their floor, in my opinion, would be 11-1 or possibly 10-2 if they were to lose to Utah. And that's going to wrap it up this week on the Lake Show, everyone. Next week, I will be making my first college football playoff predictions. I will lay out the format, and then I will lay out my own kind of college football roadmap at the end of the season, like what I feel would be a good process to finish off the year, ending this college football season on January 1st on New Year's, as I think it probably should be because the schedule is all messed up. But again, be sure to like, subscribe, share with your friends, leave some comments down below. I'm your host, Dominic Lako. God bless.
I love the chase and the hunt, and I set the pace when I'm running. I always take what I want, and I always give it 100. Don't need a bank, no, I'm funded. Play the game like it's nothing. I'm always thankful for something, don't take for granted.